Okay, so hello to all of you. Today we will begin our Dhamma talk on the topic of stream entry, as we call it in Pali Sotapanna, and training methods. Well, for us it is series number 7. With that topic in mind, of course, in this today's session, what we plan to discuss in specific stream entry, or the first stage of enlightenment, and in specific from the practical point of view. Because one of the reasons for this is because in the past sessions we've had an opportunity to look into various suttas related to Sotapanna, and this kind of theoretical aspects we've covered as well. So starting from what we left before, the aim of our today's Dhamma talk is to more of looking into practical aspects of stream entry. Well, just to briefly mention one more point in relation to this. Of course, for us today, because we are many years later, like post-Parinibbana, 2,600 years approximately from Buddha's period of time, this stream entry seems to be kind of unusual and a rare event, but in reality it is not. And if someone will understand the message behind this stream entry, it becomes really easy to experience it. So having said that, let us please proceed with today's topic further. So at first, I think it's very important for us to think from the happiness point of view, because in general, almost everyone is looking for happiness. And so there are people across centuries striving to figure out the key to happiness. And of course, it can also depend on certain individuals, that various things can give happiness to individuals, and also various circumstances. So there is no single way, but there are many things at many occasions can derive satisfaction and happiness to people, right? However, one of the interesting aspects of it, if we were to think about happiness from a broader perspective, is how far can we experience happiness? So in relation to stability, of course, if you were to examine the ordinary context of lifestyle, when someone gets something someone likes, in that case, a person would experience a lot of happiness, let's say, but then again, that happiness might short-lived. And so because this pattern continues over a period of time, over a period of time as a circle, so then at one point of time it might occur to someone's mind, how could I be possibly maintain happiness with stability? So looking from that point of view, in order to maintain happiness with stability is the key message that Buddha's teaching provide us. Although in different ways across societies, there are many ways in which people have seen the teachings of Buddha. Some call it a religion, some might think it is just something that you could find in books and so on. However, the key message or the main teachings of Buddha is how to be happy while living ordinary life. So the key message of Buddha's teaching is in fact how to maintain happiness. As you can see in the literature, over here what you are saying is SN 3575. So the key purpose or the main purpose of Buddha's teaching is that Buddha has taught the Dhamma for the purpose of complete extinguishment by not grasping. So we can actually see similar things across various other suttas, and this is what you see on slide are actually a couple of examples. It is this unshakable deliverance of mind that is the goal of this holy life. Its hearthood and its end, that is from MN 29. And another sutta, as we were to look at Mangala Sutta, it says self-restraint, a holy and chaste life, the perception of the noble truth, and the realization of Nibbana. This is the greatest blessing. So these quotes are coming from the suttas. So having said that, like I mentioned before, today our Dhamma talk is mainly talking from a practical aspect. How could we apply the understanding of Buddha's teachings into managing day-to-day life experience? So just as we spoke about happiness in the previous slide, we know when there is happiness, of course, there are times there comes the opposite of happiness. And if we were to think of the kind of feelings, or sometimes people would rightly so label them as negative feelings, and there are many of them, such as worry, guilt, fear, sadness, shame, frustration, helplessness, and hopelessness. And if we were to think about these kind of feelings, these feelings are nothing new. Of course, I think we are all familiar with all these kind of feelings, because from the time we were born into this world up until now, these are kind of normal things people experience. So this is a common situation in almost every individual. But then the point of view is these kind of negative feelings in general, if we were to think of it, when people are faced with bad life experience, or it may well be events, including traumatic events, how to reconstruct a life and the worldview gets shattered and lost. And sometimes because of this kind of negative experience in life, certain individuals might feel that they've lost the control of life. And from the conventional perspective, we would think these kind of negative feelings are normal reaction to abnormal events. And so followed by these kind of normal reactions to abnormal events, then there comes an urge to take away the pain, which is more of an instinctual in nature. On the other hand, if we were to look at it from a broader perspective, despite bad experiences, people go on surviving because sometimes it is so, there is no choice. We must go on surviving and coping, and that is how life it is. And in order to heal the kind of experiences one experience in life over the time period of time, it requires kind of skills. So healing mentally, in a way, can be said as mainly skill-based. So if we were to think about it further, we could, in simple words, say one must practice a new way of thinking and acting. Just like in every other subject, let us just take, for example, someone who wants to do a degree in the university would require to carry a certain number of hours to complete an undergraduate degree. Equally, to cope up with sort of bad experiences, of course, the way in which an individual will experience bad experiences life is up to an individual, because it's pretty much an individual experience. So outside world might not even be aware, we might not even be able to say, but all these things happen in one's mind. So in order to get away from the kind of pain and other kind of suffocations, so there is a need that one must practice new ways of thinking. So looking from that point of view, we could pretty much say, when we know things better, we do better. With regard to this aspect, it is important to examine what beliefs we carry. In general, if we were to look into the society's context, there are certain beliefs that are carried out by people. In general, we could say that in general, people tend to say, if you are not happy, there is something wrong with you. Or it may well be, someone would think, if you don't achieve your goals, you are a failure. So these kind of beliefs have been established over a period of time due to social learnings. So for instance, if we were to think about these kind of beliefs that people carry, imagine if someone carries this kind of beliefs and happen to experience something opposite to what they believe, then there is a significant risk of denying any experience that runs counter. So, for instance, someone thinks that someone believes that when you attempt to sit for an exam, you must succeed, assuming for some reason that individual happens to get failed in the exam, then that a kind of a belief, and that belief leads to an expectation, would pretty much generate a lot of stress for that person. Equally, in another context, let's say, for instance, someone expects something good happens out of a relationship with a friend or with a family member, and that is the belief they carry. For instance, family is going to be always there for you, and for some reason it doesn't turn up that way, and because of that belief, there can be a tremendous stress and suffering coming to that particular individual's mind. And so these are just two examples. Of course, there are very many occurs in many different situations and ways. So because of these kind of beliefs that mainly comes due to social learning or over the years, both individuals and other communities are at much greater risk of sufferings. If we were to think, because these kind of beliefs have been carried out by people across the societies, they tend to suffer because the expectations are not fulfilled. And it seems hard to get expectations fulfilled. And that is at the individual level. And if we were to think about society level, it seems hard to find truly happy people in societies. People run behind materialistic stuff, and then they sometimes tend to forget to think about inner meaning of life. And because of this kind of continuous process of thinking, it seems like it's hard to find happiness. So there is, of course, a healthy way we could think about how one could potentially be happier, both at the individual and community level, is to think that whole integration of such that ability to experience sadness as well as kind of negative emotions and feelings. There is a need to value these kind of feelings rather than just rejecting, because this is a normal context in all of our lives. And then that will be much healthier. Talking about the society's context, once again, it is essentially, our society is at a different level, but the changes in society takes place initially from the individual level. This is so mainly for one reason, because every individual has the right to decide what they want to do and how they feel and so on. And so the best thing, as Buddha has taught to us, is start it from your own self. So for instance, if someone wants to think this way, then that thought should begin at the individual level, and then pretty much focus on oneself. And equally, if someone wants to speak about stream entry, or even someone wants to say something to someone, please try and be a better person, then the initial step, before saying to someone, it is the responsibility of the individual who says or carries that message to have experienced that and have followed that. If someone has not completed stream entry and talking about this, then that makes very little sense. Equally, if someone has not carried this kind of virtues or training the mind in this way, or carry all the kind of good things within that person, and saying others or expecting from others similar things, that would make very little sense, and also it is unfair. So from that point of view, Buddha's teachings encourage us to pretty much focus on oneself, ourselves first, and initially try and think and develop oneself from so many ways. And thereafter, if every individual who feels that this kind of teaching is for them, that they feel they would benefit, if everyone takes the kind of the responsibility, so at the society level, there will be much more positive kind of aspects that we could expect to achieve. However, the responsibility is always begins at the individual level. So having said that, like I mentioned before, Buddha's teachings provide so many practical aspects and stream entry, although it may seem as a kind of a stage that is not achievable or experienced as to people in the modern context, because it hasn't been heard, the message has not been directly delivered, most likely. It seems it's rare, but it is very much possible to experience if you were to actually hear the practical aspect of it. So just reminding ourselves this key message of Buddha, let us please move into further consideration. So the message of Buddha's teaching shows us the fact that there is an incredible power in one's ability to see the experience in life from a broader perspective. And so from that perspective, we would probably be asking ourselves, how can one remain happy and successful in life? And so the way in which one can remain happy and also be successful, these kind of teachings are what the Buddha's teachings are showing to us. So here is something, of course, we've known from the literature, Sotapanna, that means one who enters the stream, and with the stream being the super-maintained Noble Eightfold Path, regarded as the highest Dhamma, and abandon 3 fetters at once. So essentially, these fetters are not abandoned at different times, rather they are abandoned at a single time. And these fetters are identity view, doubt in Buddha and his teachings, rites and rituals. So one of the interesting things about these rites and rituals, like we have spoken before, is mainly talking about social practices and how these kind of beliefs and other messages carried at the society level are generating a lot of stress in someone's mind. And by understanding how this society practices actually generating kind of stress in one's mind, if someone will reflect more about it and practice in line with Buddha's teachings, one will eradicate the kind of identity view or personality view. Along the same time, will eradicate doubt in Buddha and also attachments for rites and rituals. Of course, identity view, we can name it in different ways. We can also call it as ego. Ego or identity view is also called sakadagami. So from a practical point of view, there is a need to alter this identity view. If someone wants to experience peace and happiness, that is what a Sotapanna means. So remove the idea of, for example, remove the idea of I must rise, I will get succeed and so on. So essentially, that doesn't mean this kind of idea of removing I must rise doesn't suggest that one must not try to rise. And this idea of I will get succeed at any point does not suggest that one must stop being succeed. Rather, it is suggesting that try to rise, but don't believe that you will always be successful in attaining what you expect to achieve. Similarly, I will get succeed. Remove the idea of I will get succeed, meaning simply remove the idea that one will get succeed in every attempt, but that at no cost means one must not try. In fact, because it's most likely, realistically, that many times people can fail. That is why it is essential to try to succeed. However, thinking that success will come all the time generates a lot of stress. So thinking that success will come all the time is something that should be abandoned. And that is what a Sotapanna does. Because that idea that someone will succeed all the time is abandoned by a Sotapanna, there is less expectations. Even if the expectations is not fulfilled, the person no longer gets sad. And so a Sotapanna, or the person who understands Buddha's teaching, and this is the right view, remain happy all the time. So another thing practically to become a stream mentor means do not suffer mentally. And so think in the opposite direction. So the society says to us that there is a permanent self. The society says to us that there are different kind of rules and traditions and binding people, limiting people's thinking in so many ways. And because of these kind of practices, as we have spoken already, it seems that almost many people around the world without any discrimination suffer mentally in so many ways. So the message that Buddha's teachings carry, do not suffer mentally and think in the opposite direction. This is what it means to become a stream mentor. Taking a bit from the literature, once again, as you see on this slide, in 4.5, you can see because there are these 4 kinds of persons found existing in the world, what for? The person who goes along with the stream, the one who goes against the stream, the one who is inwardly firm, and the one who has crossed over and gone beyond, the Brahmin who stands on ground. Of course, in this sutta, you can see it's talking at different kinds of individuals who have eliminated fetters as different levels. So if we were to look at the very first one, it says, and what is the person who goes along with the stream? Here, someone indulges in sensual pleasures and perform bad deeds. This is called the person who goes along with the stream. That a stream here is meaning that a person just do normal stuff, ordinary stuff, what people would typically do. And in this situation, of course, someone just go on doing bad deeds without thinking much about it and reflecting on them, and most likely end up in a lot of suffering as a result. And in point number 2, and what is the person who goes against the stream? Here, someone does not indulge in sensual pleasures or perform bad deeds, even with pain and dejection, weeping with a tearful face. He lives a complete and purified spiritual life. This is called the person who goes against the stream. Of course, this number 2 is much more relevant to someone who understood that every time you do certain bad things, it generates a lot of unhappiness. And someone who has been fortunate to hear Buddha's teachings, perhaps had been fortunate to carry kind of wisdom to think this way. So because doing ordinary things, as we were taught from childhood, generate a lot of pain and suffering, maybe there is a way out, and that is to do things opposite direction in that sense. So try avoiding extreme sensual kind of pleasures, and at the same time, avoiding bad deeds. Sometimes it may appear kind of hard to manage these aspects because ordinary habits in the life are sometimes hard to get over it. However, sometimes a person who tries to goes against the kind of habits that has been established over a period of time, eventually will become a happier person. And so that is the one who goes against the stream. And finally, on number 3, and what is the person who is inwardly firm? Here, with the utter destruction of the 5 lower fetters, some person is of spontaneous birth due to attain final Nibbana, there without ever returning from that first. So of course, as we are all aware, enlightenment or Nibbana is experienced across its 4 stages: Sotapanna, sakadagami, anagami, and Arahant. Like I mentioned before, if we were to use this kind of literature and words, it may seem perhaps it's difficult and not understandable. However, it is also good to acknowledge this theoretical aspect. Having said that, let us please move into thinking more from practical aspect of stream entry. So let's think about for a moment about feelings, expectations, and wishes. Before knowing or realization, typically an individual tend to run after feelings, expectations, and wishes. And after chasing feelings, expectations, and wishes, when these feelings, expectations, and wishes, and so on, do not get fulfilled, a person tends to experience a lot of suffering. It may be that after resting a little due to mental exhaustion, an individual might take a pause, but then again, eventually, it is very likely one will run chasing these kind of expectations again and again, never to end in daily life. So it goes as a cycle. So because of these kind of ordinary ways of thinking that every individual who were born to this world were taught and learned this way from childhood, this kind of thinking generates a lot of weight or heaviness in the mind. The ignorance of avoidance of reality can cause a lot of pain and denial for an individual. And of course, it is sometimes difficult to, it can sometimes be difficult to bear. So from Buddha's teachings, the practical aspect of it is actually essentially reminding us to think that we do not always have control over things. And essentially, bad things can happen to good people, it may appear. At the same time, there are many unfair things happen to people. And sometimes it may feel like a challenge to experience these things and choose to participate in this world. When people think they always possess the ability to control things or gain things as they wish, it can create disappointment. So realization of Dhamma will become a Srimantara meaning, realizing that nothing lasts forever and that life experience is more like a dream for all of us. So those who see the world this way do not become captured by any of life experience. So Sri Mantras simply live alongside it all. So it would be interesting for us to perhaps take a few minutes to reflect and think what would be the life of a Sotapanna. Essentially, a person who becomes awakening for the first stage of enlightenment, or a Sotapanna, faces negativity with positivity. And he or she may compare this new nature in the mind with his former nature or her mind. So that just means because of understanding that essentially comes due to life experience, as we have just spoken, understanding that all these things are happening to us, all these bad kind of things can happen to all of us. Nobody can escape them. And so understanding all these things, seeing this as a normal part of life, then this is the understanding of life itself. So although it may seem it is hard, but actually the message is pretty much clear. And here you see it's actually a kind of way in which one could explain Buddha's teaching in 3 words. So if we were to explain Buddha's teaching in 3 words from practical point of view, we can use these 3 ways. That is Aswada, Adina, and Nissarana in Pali. Well, of course, I would try use much more practical words because it's much more easier to capture the meaning from that sense. So that just means when someone when someone goes on living in ordinary day-to-day life, of course, essentially almost all people, ordinary individuals, tend to be happy when they experience something good in life and seek pleasure in all the time. And so they become happy, and then people try to look so many different ways of in ways to become happy, right? Because this is just a normal instinctual desire to become happy. However, as someone tries to become happy in so many different ways, eventually life teaches, most likely, not this kind of happiness lasts long. Even the greatest happiness stays short time. And so eventually, these kind of pleasures turn up to lead to bad outcomes. And these pleasures and bad outcomes that comes from the real life experience is actually the realization. And that is realization of Buddha's teachings. When someone has had plenty of life experience, someone who tried to find pleasure in so many different ways, let's say someone enjoyed life to the fullest in doing most pleasurable things, at the same time, experience the most sorrowful things, and then have had experience both pleasurable and unpleasurable. And because of that, came to realize this kind of life experience doesn't give kind of satisfaction. Even though pleasures comes, that is not the permanent satisfaction. Would seek alternative ways to find satisfaction. And that means those individuals who have plenty of life experience are looking for Nibbana, or that is the alternative way to seek happiness. And so that just means giving up or seeing the meaningless of seeking pleasures, as well as going and experiencing bad outcomes. So giving up both pleasures and bad outcomes in one's mind. So it doesn't necessarily mean, interestingly, the presence of pleasures or outcomes. That just means attachment to pleasures and outcomes given up in one's mind is what is required to attain peace. So relinquish. So this, using these three words, we can this way practically gather an idea of Buddha's teachings. So one of the key messages carried out by Buddha's teachings is actually accept life as it is. One's mind is both a friend and it can also act as an enemy. So essentially there is a need to train the mind. And in training the mind, it is useful to examine weaknesses in one's mind. So this is quite interesting, actually. Although we hear there are different kind of meditation and stuff, in order to attain Sotapanna, the true practice is actually examine one's own weaknesses in one's mind, and this is the true practice. So it is pretty easy in that sense. People do not need to go into different places, do not need to do extra kind of things. Just while doing whatever they prefer to do, while living ordinary life, whenever someone has time and possible to think and reflect and identify weaknesses in one's mind, that is what required to train the mind to become aware or gain realization, to become a stream enterer. And when one tries to see one's mind and weaknesses occurring in this way, in this kind of thinking, or thinking opposite direction to ordinary way of thinking, that is what a Sotapanna essentially does. All kind of sadnesses and frustrations and depression and similar things, worries and so on, what people normally experience disappear. Looking back into some of the literature once again, so as you see in this sutta, there are ignorable search as well as there are noble search. So if someone will just keep on going, living life without thinking beyond what is ordinary, then that would mean they just ignore searching for the reality of life. However, the wise individuals who's had very much experience in life, who have been fortunate enough to experience life to the fullest, because of experiencing that life itself doesn't derive the perfect satisfaction, seek alternative ways of satisfaction, and that is looking for noble searches. And so in the suttas, we see what for the people are someone who is liable to grow old, knowing the drawback in what grows old, searches for the unaging supreme sanctuary, extinguishment, and so on. So it means like we all tend to get old, no one can escape. We all tend to die. And this is the kind of the nature that is faced by all of us with no exception whatsoever. And so that is the reality. And looking at reality as it is the reality itself is wise thing to do. And that is the noble search is about. So if one can observe one's mind when it gets disturbed, let's say when there are desires or when there is kind of hatred, or when there is irritability, or it may well be sadness, worries and frustrations and disappointment. Of course, the list goes on. If one can observe one's own mind and how this mind is tempted to chase after such things, if you were to practice this kind of thinking as often as possible, then it is, at one point you will realize it is pointless, because at the end, no one gains anything. And when someone realizes this, because chasing behind feelings, expectations, and so on, none of us gain anything in the end, as we are all destined for the same reality. So in this way, one comes to experience and become aware of the reality and experience peace within. So those individuals who think in the opposite direction, because of understanding reality, they tend to not be sad, as I mentioned before. So they just keep doing well in all areas of life, as you can see in this sutta. So noble disciple grows in field and land, wealth and grain, wives and kids, slaves, workers, servants, in livestock, in faith, virtuous behavior, learning, generosity, and wisdom. So the message of Buddha is that try understand what is the reality. By understanding the reality, avoid being unhappy, avoid being sad, and by avoiding sadness and frustrations and so on, do everything well in life, achieve success, but don't cling into that success. As one will not cling into that success, more and more success will come, because that means a sorrowless person. A strong person who has a mental stability tend to be successful in so many areas of life. And this is another example of from the literature taken from him 63. What is declared by me? This is stress, origination of stress, cessation of stress, and path leading to the cessation of stress, and so on. So if we were to think from literature, that is how it appears. But the message of a Sri Mentor, as I mentioned, is just a matter of simple thinking. That is, think in the opposite direction to what was ordinary. So once again, to think from a more practical point of view, so life experience is a great equalizer. So it cuts across socioeconomic strata, doesn't care about gender or whatsoever. And so all of us, as I mentioned before, realistically are subject to these kind of life experiences, and therefore applicable to all beings who are born. So the message of Buddha is universally applicable without any discrimination. Similarly, none of us are immune to the possibility of experiencing something horrific and shattering in life, and we are all subject to decay and illness and death. While that is potentially a sobering thought, awareness of these facts can be liberating and leading to awakening one's mind to the reality. Looking back into some of the literature once again, so Nibbana is the highest happiness, the supreme state of bliss, and no bliss higher than Nibbana we could find otherwise. Let's, from a practical point of view, we are talking about how to gain realization to become a Sotapanna. Let us more explore from practical point of view. So how could one go about breaking the way of thinking? What was the habit and what has been the habit over many years of one's life? Let's take, for example, one goes on doing many things, and however many things one does, there is no happiness, and one realizes happiness is short-lived. And at the same time, life does not always or mostly deliver what one likes, and when one doesn't get what one expects, then one ends up with some degree of suffering in the mind. So how should we think? What is beneficial? Essentially, like I mentioned in brief before, work on targets and other things that you think is helpful and needed and as you wish, but please do not believe or have a definite feeling that all what you do must become successful or expect must come true. It is thinking and in the doing that will help one move forward and experience happiness and peace within. Essentially, wisdom is discovered within self and calms one down. So because when someone lives a day-to-day life and one come across this kind of feeling that there is some degree of never-ending dissatisfaction because life goes on circle. Let's say, for instance, someone have a motivation to find a job. And after finding a job, then there comes another dissatisfaction. Every time someone gets something, the satisfaction never grows and the expectations even grow even more, and it continues like a cycle. So that is the kind of the cycle that in general we have been trained across years as a habit, and that just means to find happiness, to become an open-minded Sotapanna stream enter person. There is a need to understand this cycle of thinking and break through it for experiencing peace. And once again, to reflect back on that point. So how could someone who realized the Dhamma can think? What should you do? Do not maintain, please do not maintain unrealistic expectations in life. Then you would feel free. And so that essentially means doing things just like a Sotapanna would do. That means simply doing daily tasks and allowing things to happen. What must happen is beneficial here. Regardless of whatever happens, working hard is beneficial. And because of awareness that just because working hard doesn't necessarily mean success will come, then there will be no suffering. And that is the noble path in a practical way. And that is, in fact, the right understanding or the right view in a practical way. So what is beneficial? Once again, the serenity to accept the things one cannot change, and to change the things one can change, and wisdom to know the differences. So from a practical point of view, let us please talk about it. How could one break through the kind of habits that we had for a longer period of lifetime? So reflect time to think and identify every time you experience. Let's begin to think about kind of negative feelings. So essentially it would be beneficial if someone will take time to think and identify the kind, why am I experiencing sadness this time? Why am I experiencing depression or kind of frustration this time, or worry and so on? So that is the right mindfulness, thinking about the kind of your own feelings and so on. And then just like a stream mentor or Sotapanna would do, try and identify a solution, practical solution. If there is anything that needs to be done to fix the kind of sorrow, then of course, take a step to find a solution. At the same time, reflect and think, experiencing these kind of emotions are hard. It's really hard, actually. It's easy to say, but when someone actually experiences these kind of unhappiness, frustrations, disappointment, and worries, it's not easy at all. Because it's not easy. It is useful to think this way. And experiencing these emotions are meaningless because they're generally suffering. So do what is possibly a right thing to do, but not clinging into these emotions and think in the opposite directions. And realistically is what is helpful in this kind of situations, in life situations. And that is what a Sotapanna would do. And this is the kind of practice in daily life that one needs to train and apply. So it is pretty much easy also in a way, because it is easy to practice in daily life, because most these things, horrible things happen in daily life. So to practice Dhamma, one doesn't necessarily have to go anywhere in that sense. So once again, thinking from a streamentary or the Sotapanna's practical point of view, the message here is please continue to do what you prefer doing or whatever you want to do. In the meantime, when you feel dissatisfaction in life or kind of exalted, think in the manner how a Sotapanna would think. So let us also think a little bit more about how does the Sotapanna thinks. So I've tried to rephrase some ways in which a person who's understood awakened mind at the first stage of enlightenment would think. So these are some of the phrases. Regardless of whatever I do, I will not be satisfied. In fact, it is likely that I will not get what I am trying to get on many occasions. And what I will get is not what I think it will be. It is likely to be something else than what I will get in life. What I think will not happen in life. So these kind of beliefs, realistic understandings, realistic beliefs are the kind of the beliefs that helps a person to remain happy. And so Sotapanna means the one who carries these kind of beliefs. Essentially, awakening mind to the reality of life means understanding life as it is. So these are the kind of thinking patterns that are beneficial to become a Sotapanna. Then the mind will tell you, if someone will train more and more often, try and reflect life experience from this point of view, and more one train one's mind, then at a particular time, your own mind will likely to tell you not to chase unrealistic expectations. It will say there is nothing to gain by running behind these things. Rather, just simply enjoy, relax, and sit back life, just taking as it is. So to reflect more about how does a Sotapanna thinks, hopes are the limit of success. So there are so many limits actually. So hopes can be seen as one way when someone has a lot of hopes. Because of hopes, when they don't achieve the hopes, the person gets frustrated. So once again, the message here is not to have hopes. Of course, have hopes, work on them, but at the same time, be realistic and understand that it is normal for all of us. Not all hopes come true. And because it is normal thing, so not to get disheartened when hopes are broken. And that is how a Sotapanna would think. And this kind of a training in mind, or this kind of thinking patterns or cognitive styles are beneficial. So that just means thinking in the opposite manner to what we were taught and told over many years of life. Looking back into literature once again, MN 133, don't run back to the past, don't hope for the future. I think this is a very famous quote. So of course, essentially a Sotapanna, as well as this is most likely applicable for all individuals who are wise. For all of us, it's a good thing to work on today as we we all do not know really what happens tomorrow. So instead of delaying things, whatever that needs to be done, it's good to do it today, and including practicing Dhamma and training mind in this way, so that all kind of unwanted sorrows and worries and so on can be eliminated. And here I would like to reflect on the fact that Sotapanna, the person who gains the stream entry, would experience life in a middle way. So that just means if you could, perhaps if you would find this is useful, of course, if you were to decide this is a beneficial practice, generally in ordinary life, because of the habits that we were told over the lifespan, people tend to experience happiness when they are faced with positive things. When faced with negative things, people experience sorrow and negative emotions. However, by gaining realistic understanding of life, if someone can try slowly train the mind when experiencing positive things, not to get over positive about it, slowly, and then as the next step, not to get too much negative about negative experiences, and bring slowly into the middle path of mind, then that will be once again very beneficial. So in that sense, as you train your mind over a longer hours of time across days, then mind will become stable despite ups and downs, positive or negative experiences in life. So these habits are actually the nature of the mind is that mind makes habit due to a kind of learning over a long period of time. So there, as I repeatedly mentioned, there is a need to change the way of thinking for the benefit of oneself and for the well-being of oneself. And because the life is short for all of us, it makes sense to find happiness and be happy. And then the next question would be how to be happy. By understanding the reality, it becomes possible to gain happiness. So one way to think is that whatever happens in the outside world may not affect my mind and happiness and well-being. So once again, if you were to look into kind of literature in that aspect, you can see in this sutta, reflection and the power of development are two powers. So the power of reflection means one reflects bad conduct of body, speech, or mind, has a bad, painful result in both this life and the next. Reflecting like this, they can give up bad conduct by way of body, speech, and mind, and develop good conduct by way of body, speech, and mind, keeping themselves pure. This is called the power of reflection. And the power of development is when someone develops the awakening factors. That just means it begins from the right view. And so today's discussion is mainly about the right view. That is what the Sotapanna gains. And right view means understanding and thinking in the opposite direction to what we were taught from childhood and many years of life. So in order to train one's mind, once again, self-analysis can be a way to liberation. And what I mean by self-analysis is actually to think and reflect about yourself. So our focus, once again, should be on us. Like I mentioned before, it is a very individual process because for several reasons. One thing is it is up to every individual to decide how they want to live life and so on. It's a very personal decision. Equally, it is up to every individual to make their choices, how they want to be happy and so. So it is an individual process. So the practice of Dhamma should begin by oneself. So in that sense, in practice of Dhamma, we don't expect what others should do or not. Of course, we can communicate to them, but the decision is theirs and the practice is also up to them. However, the essential key point is that there is a need to think and reflect about oneself and practice oneself. So also it is quite interesting that because the direct teaching of Buddha seems to be hard to find, it may appear that becoming a stream enterer is difficult, but actually it's not. we could say that anyone is capable of anything if they have the true intention and wanting to give up the kind of unsatisfaction they experience in life. And if they were to choose that they would like to explore the true teachings of Buddha, let's say, for example, then it becomes possible for anyone to become a stream enterer. And so also develop the capacity in doing, becoming a stream mentor also in a simple words, in a more understandable language, if we were to say, that just means developing the capacity to endure terrific life experiences, or it may well be experience any kind of positive, negative, and whatsoever life experiences. And that is the awakening of mind. So if you were to think about these life experiences, we could also say that sometimes it is the struggle or the kind of negative experiences we go through in life that teaches us lessons, or that awakens one's mind to the reality. So it is the struggle to re-emerge that is crucial in the process of transformation. Without the struggle, the new entity will not appear. So struggle and difficulty in development of character, and oftentimes something more meaningful can be achieved, such as a noble character, or in others, we were to say noble saint or Arya Sangha. So the path to Nibbana is once again coming from real life experience. And these kind of life experience reflecting in the opposite direction, because the person has experienced both positive and negative, and realize that whatever in life doesn't really give the ultimate satisfaction, looking for alternative ways. Due to that, all these kind of struggles and difficulties in life, find a meaningful way and develop a noble character to become a noble person. And that is also reflecting a degree of wisdom in a person. And so touching a bit of literature once again, taking the Sutta MN43, they speak of a wise person. How is a wise person defined? They are called wise because they understand. And what do they understand? They understand this is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering, and so on. So essentially, like I said, a stream enterer, by understanding the reality of life, then they would think in the opposite direction. And across the 4 stages of enlightenment, the cessation of suffering will come through as it is a progressive stage. So once again, I think it is beneficial for all of us to reflect the fact that mind is very much possible to develop. Every individual carries this capacity. And also a developed mind can bring happiness. And so therefore, it's if I were to say that it is precious because a developed mind brings happiness, I think that is what the Buddha's message is. And so, of course, essentially, by cutting across all these kind of thinkings that are not realistic, having cut off all attachments and having removed anguish in the heart, the peaceful one sleeps well, having attained peace of mind. If you were to think about how much suffering almost all people across the world experiences, because not really taking time to think and think in a more broader perspective of life. Sometimes it feels like it's not worth the suffering these people experience because it's hard. So by understanding this broader point of life, those who understand as things as they really are, they gain lots of benefits. So having a peaceful sleep and having a peace of mind is the gift that comes along with it. So the message of Buddha is truly beneficial in that sense. So apart from, so far we have been talking about how beneficial the different ways of thinking in day-to-day lifestyle, and actually that is the kind of thinking that is needed very much to become a open-minded person or a stream enterer. And apart from that, more of other ways. And please also bear in mind, I would like to please mention the fact that Buddha's teachings are essentially progressive path. So the faithful succeed, not the faithless. The energetic succeed, not the lazy. The mindful succeed, not the unmindful. Those with immersion succeed, not those without immersion. The wise succeed, not the witless. And so when you're grounded on these 5 things, go on to develop 6 further things. So basically developing faith and energy and mindfulness and immersion and the wisdom. Wisdom means the way in which we could potentially think wisely about life experience. These things are beneficial to develop the mind further. I think in day-to-day practice, once again, especially to become a stream mentor, a person who becomes a stream mentor appreciate Buddha as the only teacher. And this is because of appreciation of the message of Buddha's teachings. And so the stream mentor becomes a person who truly goes to refuge in Buddha and his teachings, as well as those who carry Buddha's teachings are noble sanghas. So the right practice itself means begins with going to refuge to Buddha, his teachings, and noble sangha. And apart from the fact that, of course, paying homage to Buddha and his teachings in day-to-day practice is helpful, besides thinking as a stream mentor in the opposite direction, if these things you have probably known for many years, but just to reflect the memory, perhaps a noble disciple carries noble virtues. That just means a noble person would treat others like the way one likes to be treated. So because nobody wants, in general context, people likes to live and don't want to die equally. The others would also want to live and don't want to die. So a noble disciple would treat others as the way he or she wants to be treated. So this is what this sutta shows. I want to be happy and I dislike pain. Since this is so, if someone were to take my life, I wouldn't like that. But others also want to live and don't want to die. They want to be happy and dislike pain. So if I were to take the life of someone else, he wouldn't like that either. The thing that is disliked by me is also disliked by others. Since I dislike this thing, how can I give that pain to someone else? Reflecting this way, first, he gives up killing beings. He encourages others to abstain from killing. He praises the act of abstaining from killing. Bodily behavior is purified in 3 ways. So this is another way to reflect and practice. So just please try and treat others as much as you would like to be treated, because this is what kind of virtues a noble disciple would possess. So essentially, I would like to mention something in relation to this. Taking precepts and training rules are beneficial only up until one becomes a stream mentor. They are beneficial because a person has they are useful to have kind of concentration. But the person who becomes gains the realization by becoming a stream mentor or Sotapanna no longer needs these kind of precepts or training rules, essentially because of eradicating 3 fetters. They naturally tend to gain these kind of noble virtues, which are different from precepts and training rules. This is at a different level. This is at a noble level, but it's not difficult. So those who want to gain peace and experience happiness, to become a noble character or to develop your character to become a noble person, is simply trying to treat others in a right and better ways, the simple message that this sutta carries. And apart from that, like I mentioned before, there is very interesting and important practice that could be applicable to day-to-day practices. Of course, thinking and reflecting a lot about, as much as possible, about Buddha, because like I mentioned before, if someone wants to just practice Dhamma, of course, it doesn't matter. It's a personal choice. But if someone were to was interested in truly becoming a stream mentor, then I must be honest and admit the fact that it is very important, essentially, to reflect on Buddha, because that is how the path goes on. So reflecting on Buddha is important, apart from thinking on day-to-day life experience from the opposite direction, because these are the qualities, once again, a stream mentor carries. So thinking and training this way will help one to become a stream mentor. This is just to show the 4 kinds of streams or the merits that Sotapanna will possess. That is the unshakable confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. So these are the 4 factors of stream entry as well. And apart from that, the generosity and so on is a quality that generate happiness and wholesomeness. And of course, I'm sure almost everyone is aware that practice of giving and living a rigorous life and developing kind of loving kindness and treating others nicely, because essentially at the end, it is how much one practice this kind of opposite direction of opposite way of thinking, and how much, to what extent one practice this kind of loving kindness and other good qualities to become a noble character is what will help one to become a noble person. Nothing else really. So it doesn't really matter what you do. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what you wear or what to eat. These things are not relevant. What matters is the extent to what someone truly carry this and practice this, the teachings and good qualities that has been taught to us by Buddha. So once again, this particular sutta is showing that it is essential to develop skillful qualities, and by developing these skillful qualities, one can cut through unskillful qualities or the habits. So this is again to reflect on the fact that if someone is interested in becoming a stream mentor, then essentially developing these 4 factors, that is confidence in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and the kind of virtues, that means treating others as the way one likes to be treated, that is called noble virtues, are helpful. And this is how one should train in order to become an open-minded, noble person at the first stage of enlightenment. So finally, of course, we have come to the end of today's session. I would like to please briefly mention, in terms of daily practice, if someone can engage in chantings, or it may be offering flowers or fragrance or anything else at all to a Buddha or his statue. Of course, it's a personal decision, but I think I have responsibility to mention, as these are helpful practices, as one engages in these practices, that would also means one would be reflecting on Buddha and his teachings. And the more one reflect on Buddha and his teachings, it will also be helpful to one to think in the opposite directions, and also that along the same time reflect on non-self view. Will definitely and certainly, for those who practice in this way, just like I mentioned, 100% guaranteed it is possible to become a stream mentor. It is definitely possible. I would say it from my side, of course. And if you will practice this way, please, it will become possible for you to realize it from your direct experience. So that is the message I would like to share. And that is, of course, the end of our today's Dhamma talk. So thank you very much for your participation.